current quarterback 18 overall with an 11th round ADP. Now, over the span of 12 months, everyone has gone from loving CJ Stroud to almost forgetting he exists. He had huge expectations in 2024 and came out looking average at best. Just 3,727 yards passing, 20 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. And now, no one seems to care what led to those down numbers last year. They just hate him. But correct me if I'm wrong. When a quarterback loses his top pass catching weapons, can that affect his production? Yes, it can. So why does everyone talk about the quote unquote sophomore slump, but no one mentions that Nico Collins missed 5 games, Tank Dell missed 3 games, and Stephon Diggs missed 9 games. And on top of that, Joe Mixon missed 3 games as well. Did CJ Stroud play great football last season? No, but the guy didn't just lose one wide receiver for a couple games. That is a combined total of 17 missed games from his top 3 wide receivers just last season. Now in 2025, we know Tank Dell is out and Stephon Diggs is a Patriot. They added Christian in a passing game this season. Now we got a healthy alpha wide receiver in Nico Collins, 2 solid young wide receivers in Higgins and Noel, a solid tight end in Dalton Schultz, and a banged up Jones of the Minnesota Vikings, the current running back 25 in the 6th round. And I don't know if I've received more hate on any player this offseason than Aaron Jones. Now, he's coming off a career high in workload. Jones carried the ball 255 times. That's a lot, but it's not like it's 355. People are kind of overreacting at that number a little bit, but 255 was a career best. He racked up just over 1,100 rushing yards, and both of those marks led the Vikings team. Now, Minnesota still had over 100 carries go to running backs outside of Aaron Jones. So those of you worried about Jordan Mason, there are touches available, and he allows Aaron Jones to not be overworked and stay efficient. It's not like Aaron Jones was overly dependent on touchdowns last year anyway. So even if Jordan Mason steals some of the touchdowns away, it doesn't overall kill the value of Aaron Jones. We also can't ignore the dual threat upside of Aaron Jones. He added 51 receptions for 408 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns last year. That gave him a total of over 1,500 scrimmage yards. He was super versatile, and it ranked him as the RB 16.5 PPR on the season. With an average of 4.5 yards per carry on 255 carries, Jones was among the NFL's most efficient running backs last season. He ranked inside the top 15 among all NFL running backs in yards created, targets, red zone touches, and snap share. He's got that breakaway ability. He's one of the league's most explosive runners. He's earning at least 5 yards on 39.4% of his carries over the last 5 years. That is the best rate among all running backs. He has a 2-year, $20 million contract, $13 million guaranteed. That shows some confidence in this backfield. The offensive line is improved. Minnesota will enter 2025 with a top 10 offensive line and a quarterback who will be starting for the first time. That's going to force him to lean on the run game even more. But where I really look here are his past fantasy finishes. He has finished higher than RB25, which is where he is currently going, in every single season he's played at least 13 games. I mean, if we want to be realistic about a projection for him this season, I'm looking at right around 225 carries. We'll buy into the fact that maybe his volume this year decreases slightly due to the addition of Jordan Mason, but that's still going to put him just over 1,000 yards rushing. For his career, he's averaging 4.9 yards per carry, but due to the increase in age, we'll drop it down to 4.7 just to appease the haters. We know he's going to be involved in the receiving game, so we'll pencil him in for 40 receptions. He's had at least 40 receptions in 5 of his last 6 seasons played. The only season he didn't is a season in which he only played 11 games, which is going to put him right around 300 yards receiving because he's been in the area of 7 yards per reception over the last few seasons and right around 7 total touchdowns. He's had a minimum of 7 touchdowns every season he's played 13 games as well. If he gets anywhere near that projection, it's going to be right around 198 half PPR points, which would make him a Verge top 15 running back on the season. The guy's going as the RB25. I understand that people love Jordan Mason because of what they saw him do in a very small sample size in San Francisco. But to look at Aaron Jones and just completely write him off At an RB25 discount, I'm fading that hate in 2025. Which takes us to a couple wide receivers. The first one is Tyreek Hill, currently the wide receiver 14 going in the 3rd round. Now, after last year, the Dolphins' weapons are cheaper than they have ever been, and I get it. We all saw what this team was like without Tua, and it's not exactly a safe bet to expect Tua to play all 17 games this season. But Tyreek Hill has been a top 8 fantasy wide receiver 6 of the last 8 seasons. The 2 years he didn't make that, one, he only played in 12 games. The other was last year when Tua went down for 6 games. That led to Tyreek Hill finishing as the wide receiver 21. Now, finishing at wide receiver 21 is not some massive difference from wide receiver 14 where he's going right now. I'm just not ready to say that Tyreek Hill is finished and just completely forget about him at a price like this. Will I draft Tyreek Hill earlier than the 3rd round? Absolutely not. But right now, that projected ADP and in drafts all over the place, he's still going in the 3rd round. But on top of all of that, wide receiver is the deepest position in fantasy, and you can still grab 2 safe core players in the first 2 rounds. You could go double RB and have Tyreek in the 3rd. You could split the difference and go with somebody like Malik Neighbors, Josh Jacobs, and then grab Tyreek Hill in the 3rd as your wide receiver 2. If I can do something like that, I'm all in, because I have told you all for years that I will take one risk every 4 rounds in my fantasy football draft. And at wide receiver 14, I wouldn't think twice about Tyreek Hill being that risk in 2025. Now, last year, Tyreek had 81 catches for 959 yards and 6 touchdowns with 53 yards rushing as well. If he could just add 150 yards and 1 touchdown, he returns draft value. It's not like 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns is some big ask of Tyreek Hill. Now, if he can go any higher than that, it's just gravy at that point. Now, I do understand the hate somewhat, but more so, there is risk surrounding Tyreek Hill, and it's not just Tyreek Hill, it's the quarterback situation with Tua's injury history. But personally, if I start off my draft and I nail the first 2 rounds of it with players that I really want, Tyreek Hill is probably a risk that I take in 2025. Now, how about Zay Flowers? Everybody hates Zay Flowers all of a sudden, the current wide receiver 26 in the 5th round. And this is what happens when you fade down the stretch of a season. People write you off the following year. Because if you remember, through the first 9 weeks of 2024, Zay Flowers was the wide receiver 10 overall in fantasy and had outscored guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. But then, from week 10 on, he was the wide receiver 48 and was outscored by guys like Kayshon Boutte, MVS, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and even his teammate Rashad Bateman. But now we get a discount at wide receiver 25 in 2025. Well, this offseason, Baltimore went out and added DeAndre Hopkins, but he isn't the same guy that he was a few years ago. The guy I'm more worried about this season is actually Rashad Bateman. And it's not like he's going to be some weekly 10-plus target guy, but we really saw Lamar look his way down the stretch and deeper down the field in 2024. Bateman ended up hauling in 9 touchdowns, and I'm sorry, but the big-time touchdown upside in this Baltimore offense lies with Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, and Rashad Bateman. Zay Flowers isn't going to be a huge red zone threat. For him to score a lot of fantasy points, he's going to need to rack up a ton of targets and receptions. But therein lies the problem. Baltimore isn't really known for its passing volume. And with the added piece of DeAndre Hopkins, it's just another mouth to feed. Could Flowers make a small improvement this year? Sure, no doubt. I could definitely see 80 catches for just over 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns. But that's 185 fantasy points and keeps him right there in that wide receiver 20 to 25 range. The guy just tries to be too shifty. Just get up the field, bro. More north and south, less side to side. The hate of wide receiver 25, honestly, probably the area he needs to be in this season. Which leaves me to the most hated player of the offseason, and honestly, it has to do with a lot of people just seeing the name and not listening. Because if you're anywhere near reasonable and look at the overall situation, there is too much hate around Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta